What's up, everybody? Welcome back in. It's the Sooners on SI podcast, episode 264. And it's a return to SEC play for the Sooners as they head to Columbia, renew hostilities with old Big Eight foes Missouri, and take on the number 24 Tigers. 6:45 p.m. Saturday night. Be there or be square. We will be there. I am Ryan Chapman, as always, joined by our fearless leader, the great John Hoover, who... It's been a minute since you've been to Columbia. What do you remember about the great Faroe Field?
It was a night game, 2000 what did we say, 2010.
2010, Landry Jones
Yeah.
sucked, per usual.
A dude by the name of Alden Smith, defensive end who played in the NFL for quite a long time, introduced himself rather violently to Landry Jones. 2006 was a day game. Oklahoma went in there a little bit of an underdog. OU was ranked higher. OU went in there and won. So I've seen some crazy games at Mizzou, and I wasn't covering the Sooners in 2002, but everybody remembers that fake field goal that Bob Stoops called, trailing by a point in 2002. You're trailing by a point, and you, instead of kicking the go-ahead field goal, he called a fake. And Matt McCoy launches a prayer to Chris Chester. Chris Chester catches it between his elbows and his chest. Chris Chester, who goes on to play 10 or 11 years in the NFL as an offensive guard. And Matt McCoy, who sells insurance literally about 300 yards from my house. So shout out both of those guys for making OU history at Mizzou. Man, it's I looked it up, Ryan. It's a very entertaining series. OU dominates it, but it's always been a very entertaining series.
Yeah, it's weird. No one mourned losing OU Missouri like losing OU Oklahoma State, and it's like the exact same series. Like, it's fun. There are big stretches where Oklahoma has dominated, but it's overall good games. I digress. Also, that 2010 game is one of the games I will point to when people try to put Landry Jones in the pantheon of OU greats. I'm like, he is statistically an OU great, but if you put him on a big stage, he played like that a lot. What was his big moment? Against West Virginia? No. This is where we learned what Landry Jones was. Hopefully, a very different situation for Oklahoma this week. I think a lot of Oklahoma fans will be happy to learn that Jack Starld's a bit of a different guy as we come in. This is a bit of a bizarre week already when it comes to OU and Missouri, John, and it has almost nothing to do with what was said on Tuesday at the Rip Venables press conference, what was said on Tuesday at the Eli Drinkwitz press conference. The most telling things might have come from Las Vegas and then from Jackson Arnold himself. Let's start with the Vegas of it all, Hoove. Oklahoma 5-4, coming off that win over Maine. Missouri 6-2, 2-2 in SEC play. They're coming off a bye week. Yet another team to play Oklahoma coming off a bye week. That makes Texas, but OU was also off a bye. South Carolina, Ole Miss, Missouri. Am I missing anybody else?
I
All
think
those
you got them.
teams. Did Tennessee, were they coming off a bye? No, they were not. Too early in the season. It was week 4. Settle, Ryan. But anyway, a lot of those teams. The big question for Missouri is Brady Cook entered that game against Alabama, and everyone was concerned about his ankle. It was Brady Cook's hand that became the story pretty quickly. Drew Pine had to take over. People may remember Drew Pine from that Notre Dame quarterback 2 years ago that couldn't throw screen passes. That Drew Pine. They might remember him last year as when Oklahoma played at Cincinnati, and we watched 2 games that night, one of them being Ohio State Notre Dame, and one of the all-time great choke jobs by the Irish. Thank you to them. Was I holding the ticket? Who knows? The other game happening that night, Drew Pine lit up USC for Arizona State a year ago. That Drew Pine, he stepped in and was bad, awful, catastrophic against Bama, threw 3 interceptions. So it's the will he or won't he as far as Brady Cook, the Missouri starting quarterback. And this opened as a 4-point favorite for Missouri, on Sunday. And by the time we left the stadium on Tuesday night, for interviews, Oklahoma was a field goal favorite, a 7-point swing. This is not me reporting anything, John, but you know this. I know this. You don't have to do this very long to know 7-point swing means one thing. Vegas has the goods on who is going to play a very important position, i.e. quarterback. which means I now am fully expecting Drew Pine to start and play a majority of this game for Missouri based off that big old line move out of Vegas in Columbia.
Yeah, the thing about that line movement, I think we were having a discussion yesterday, you and I, and we talked about Brady Cook's wrist, and they're looking closely at it. They're trying to determine, if he could possibly play. It doesn't sound like he's going to play. And of course, historically speaking, in college football, Vegas knows this before Eli Drinkwitz can talk about it at the press conference, right? Vegas knows it before Brent Venables can talk about it at his press conference. Vegas knows these things. They've got people on campus. They've got people in hospitals, right, reading medical reports. So it doesn't look like Brady Cook is going to be available to play. And if that's the case, again, not announcing anything, just making a supposition here. If that's the case, I can see where that thing would swing in literally a day and a half. When we woke up Monday, OU was still a 1.1 to 2 point underdog. And by the time we got to the stadium last night for interviews, that thing had flipped completely. Like what? It was like then the 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So for it to move that fast, you're right. Absolutely tells you unequivocally that there is some drama with the Missouri quarterback situation.
And it'll be big for Oklahoma because this is the game that you look at the rest of these. They beat Maine. We talked about it in the post game, right? Saturday from the stadium. Missouri is by far the most gettable of this last stretch at Missouri, bye week, home against Bama, at LSU, just based off the fact that they've been in a bunch of one-score games here. Boston College played them really tight. Missouri won that game. Vanderbilt took them to overtime, but it was Vanderbilt's inability to capitalize there. Then the two pretty decent teams Missouri has played, a no contest against Texas A&M, and then obviously the Alabama game. We talked about the injury stuff there. This team's a different animal with and without Brady Cook. And it kind of harkens back, Hoove, to something we talked about all the way in the non-conference of, yes, Oklahoma's injury situation was mounting, and it didn't get much better, but I think we did talk about, like, hey, other teams are allowed to get injured too. And so some of these games on the back end of the schedule might look a little bit different, especially after you've gone through 5-6 SEC games. For Ole Miss, it was no Trey Harris. And that was big for a half until Oklahoma's offense kind of fell away a little bit. In Missouri, Ole Miss, was able to just kill Oklahoma. Jordan Watkins, stuff like that. Jordan Watkins, who had 5 touchdowns against Arkansas, by the way. He good? Yeah, I think so. Now you look at it, and Oklahoma might be playing a team with a backup quarterback and a bad backup quarterback at that. This isn't like a young 5-star who's just rough around the edges. It's not what BYU had to contend with a year ago when Dylan Gabriel left that game at halftime and Jack Sarno coming in. Drew Pine's immobile, inaccurate, throws to the other team. It's the perfect recipe for a really weird night out at Fro Field. And part of those double live movement too, if we're really going to peel it back and try and understand Vegas, which, by the way, I think I figured it out. We've been misunderstanding things the whole time. 1984, that's not about the government. The casinos and the sports books have cameras everywhere, all across the country, in every room for this stuff right here, so they can get these early line movements. The way I interpret this is that first line movement on Monday leads right into something we're about to talk about. Jalil Farouk releases a hype video on his Twitter account of him making some plays. That was Sunday night or Monday. This was a game that you had heard that, okay, it makes sense, right? Jalil Farouk's played against Temple. If he plays against Missouri, Bama, and LSU, he's not redshirted at this point in his career. He can play all those games, maintain his red shirt. If Oklahoma makes a bowl game, great. He can play in that for free. If not, season's over, whatever. And now we get to fast forward to Tuesday night. Jackson Arnold, the Oklahoma quarterback, asked about Jalil Farouk and Deion Burks, and he's like, yeah, man, having those guys back, it would open up a lot for the running game. And damn it, we're getting 2 of our studs back. That's great, right? But Jackson Arnold, did he reveal, John, that Jalil Farouk and Deion Burks are coming back? Is he going to get a stern talking to from Oklahoma Media Relations for that little slip in there at the end of his interview?
Or Brent Venables, if he didn't peel back the curtain and reveal the truth about here comes Jalil Farouk and maybe here comes Deion Burks, then him and Brent Venables are working in an all-time subterfuge collusion behind the Iron Curtain type secrets here, where Brent Venables says at his press conference and says on Monday at his coach's show, we might get some guys back. We're hoping to get some guys back. They could come back. We'll see what's happening. They're getting their boot off, and okay, now Jackson, here's what I want you to say at your press conference, or when you talk to the media tomorrow night. I want you to go out there and say you're getting some dudes back. They're running around in practice and they're making plays. I don't think that's happening, but it's college football. I wouldn't put it past anybody.
This is the regime that, if you remember, in 2022, ahead of the OU Texas game, intentionally spliced in one highlight of Dylan Gabriel. I know that was intentionally spliced in there. Like, I can tell you that. Is that a report? Whatever. That happened with this coaching staff, but I don't think that's what happened with Jackson Arnold.
This is not to the level of Mike Leach dropping a call sheet for Texas to find in 1999. But if that's the case, if those guys come out and they do play or they don't play, I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to watch. OU, I told you this a couple of weeks ago, Ryan, if they could just play a little bit better against Ole Miss with the new offensive coordinator and the new quarterbacks coach, and your quarterback reinstated to a starting job, and then you play a little bit better, practice well, have a good week of practice, you play a little bit better against Maine, and then you come out and you practice and you practice well and you play a little bit better against Missouri. Maybe you start to get a couple of bodies back. I think we're seeing some of that. I think we're seeing that kind of a little bit come true. It wasn't exactly a historic thing that I laid out there as kind of mapping the future or anything like that. It wasn't a prophecy, but those things that I threw out there a couple of weeks ago are starting to come true. I think we're starting to see a little bit of improvement, a little bit better play calling, a little bit better quarterback coaching, a little bit simplified game plan, a little bit better play up front on the offensive line for sure. And now you start sprinkling in injured receivers into the mix. Who knows how this thing's going to end up?
Yeah, that's what we were. I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was coming out of South Carolina and Ole Miss, something like that. We were talking about it, right? Like for 2005 and 2009, that question you asked earlier.
Yep.
Did they end up where they wanted to end up? No, but that last month of the season, you could at least see improvement, whether that meant that they won the game, lost the game, whatever. Coming out of South Carolina, it was kind of doom and gloom because it was like, no, this team is still going backwards. They're still sinking. Obviously, improvement in the first half against Ole Miss. And then you just look at last week. Maine, FCS team, I get it. Bad FCS team, or mediocre at best FCS team, I get it. Are they a lot worse than Temple? Yeah. But Oklahoma still had, like 370-ish total yards of offense against Temple.
Yep.
They went for like 640 against Maine. That is significant, even considering how bad Maine is, even compared to Temple. And Temple's one of the worst teams in college football. I think that it's unquestioned that this group is playing a little bit more confident on the offense, whatever that looks like. The phrase that Brent Venables has dialed in on multiple times when talking about Joe John Finley, what the difference is play sequencing. Every time he gives an answer about Joe John Finley, he says that play sequencing has been better. He's talking about the play calling as far as things fitting together, which I think is his way of the stuff that we all talk about, stuff that everybody talked about. Why are you running up the middle to the strength of a Tennessee defense? Why are you running up the middle to the strength of a Texas defense? I think that that's what you're looking at. And now if Jalil Farouk and Deion Burks come back in, it'll be a really big question mark, Hoover, or maybe a question that can be answered of, was this truly 90% receivers hurt and 10% the offensive line sucks? Was it going to matter if you have all your healthy receivers if the offensive line can't hold up? That's something that we can find out. We're recording Wednesday at about 1:20. The first availability report comes out tonight. By the time you're listening to this, it's already come out. My expectation is that Jalil Farouk will be listed as probable and that Deion Burks will be listed as questionable. But I think that both those guys are going to give it a go if they can. For you, Hoove, let's operate in the world in which Jalil Farouk plays, okay? On Saturday, we know Jalil Farouk, this Oklahoma offense, the last 2 years, what they like to do with him, use him out of the backfield, use him as a running back, use him on reverses, use him as a wide receiver, use him inside, use him outside. The way that Javonte Barnes is running right now, and the fact that Jalil Farouk's coming off a broken foot, do you think that if he plays, Oklahoma's going to use their full their full stack of these are all the ways we want to use Jalil Farouk, or since they're working him back in, is it going to be like, hey, what Javonte Barnes has done has been great. Lean on that and just let Jalil Farouk play wide receiver and try to keep things as simple as possible for Arnold in this offense.
Yeah, I don't think you can take a guy off basically 2 months of IR, right, and say, okay, go win the game for us, go get 10 catches for 150 yards. That's not realistic. If you can get him the football 4 times in a winning position, right? Maybe it's downfield, maybe it's a 3rd and 10, maybe it's on the sideline like his previous catch in the season opener against Temple. Maybe you find him on a 3rd down in the end zone. You don't need a ton of productivity out of somebody who's coming back from a foot injury. You do need from one of your best players, one of your most reliable, explosive, dynamic players. You do need some productivity. So if he's capable of playing, I do look for them to get the football to him, but they're not going to overdo it. They're not going to just, pound the rock to their wide receiver. I wouldn't think, and I would certainly, if I was Jeff Lebby, I might do this, but if I was Joe John Finley, I don't think I would run him on any jet sweeps or reverses or anything like that. Get him out there, get him down the field, and get the football to him in a big play situation, because the Missouri secondary can be had a little bit. I think we agree with that. So yeah, and another play that's kind of gone by the wayside with the new play caller is taking your fastest player, Brennan Thompson, and throwing him screen passes at the line of scrimmage. That hasn't been part of the game plan since Joe John Finley took over. So you're right. The sequencing, the play design, the connectivity of the plays, things that make sense that you do to put your people, and Brent has expressed this a lot in the last 2 weeks, put your people in position to succeed. Put your players in position to have success. And I think Joe John Finley's play calling has allowed Oklahoma's offense to do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And as you mentioned too, if you get Farouk and Burks back, it's a little bit easier to say, hey, just feed 3 catches here and 3 catches. Well, suddenly for each one of those guys, if they're coming back together, it's almost like a weird, you can maybe work them back in slowly and then still have a big impact when it's both guys coming back at once, as opposed to, okay, you need to slowly bring Farouk back and the defense doesn't have to worry about Deion Burks, because suddenly they go out there and go, hey, I know that they haven't popped up on field yet this year, but these two are the guys, right? It'll make things pretty interesting. So other things that popped up out of the Brent Venables press conference. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Missouri's situation right now. They're not only going to be down, we think, Brady Cook, they're going to be down, we're pretty sure, Nate Noel, their starting running back. He's a guy that transferred from Appalachian State this year. He was leading the team in rushing. He had 500 yards rushing, a couple of touchdowns, was averaging six yards a carry. He had a 1,000-yard season, I think his freshman season, or maybe it was his sophomore season at Appalachian State. He's had put up some good productivity numbers. He had a career high this season, 199 yards against Vanderbilt. He's been out. He's missed the last few games, the last 3 or 4 games, I think. I think he got 2 conference games in and then got injured. He's not going to be available either. So if he were playing and Brady Cook were playing, I don't think that Oklahoma would be a 3-point favorite.
Yeah, yes on both ends there. So interesting to see. Also, back to the offense real quick before we flip over to Missouri's offense in full. Here's the other good news for Oklahoma. Missouri's a good defense, but they're not Ole Miss and they're not South Carolina. They're in the 50s. They're either 52 or 54 in rushing defense. As you mentioned, teams have been able to throw on Missouri a little bit. They've been able to move the ball. This is not a bad defense by any means, but they're just kind of middle of the road, especially by SEC standards. A defense that you just find near the bottom of that. On the NCAA stat page, it goes 1 to 50, 51 to 100. Then the back page where you don't want to be, they're firmly either you go to the first page and scroll down, or they're right at the top of the second page. So that'll be good news for Oklahoma to finally play a not elite defense. Obviously, Maine was not that, but it's kind of been running your head into against the wall with Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss. Missouri definitely wants to lean on Luther Burden, Brady Cook, those guys, and can be without Brady Cook. Let's flip it over now.
I want to explore those stats just a little bit. Missouri defense, 13th in the country in total defense, All right. So they've had a manageable schedule, if you think about it. They've not just had a bunch of butchers coming at them, but 13th in the country in total defense, 10th in the country in passing yards allowed. I said that the secondary can be had a little bit. I still believe that, but over the course of a season, their defense ranks number 10. And then in rushing yards, you're right, 54th in the country. So that has to be Oklahoma's, and I know we'll explore this in depth, but that has to be Oklahoma's MO is now that Javonte Barnes is running like a legit vintage, I called him last week, OU running back, and the offensive line is starting to get a little cohesion, starting to get some, you got Troy Everett in the middle, kind of diagnosing things on the blocking schemes. Now that they've figured out some things up front on the offensive line, and guys are getting better. I think we saw both Heath Ozaida and Logan Howland last week get better. And certainly those freshmen got in there. I think that has to be Oklahoma's method of what am I trying to say? Modus operandi is getting the football to Javonte Barnes, run the football, and when you have success running the football, then you can expose that secondary with those new old/injured/wide receivers coming back from IR.
The refurbished toys, the shiny refurbished toys.
Yes.
Because remember, this was Missouri. They played Murray State, Buffalo, a Boston College team that we found out is pretty bad. That Boston College hype train was more about Florida State being awful and us not knowing that Florida State was that awful early in the season. Vanderbilt, what does Vanderbilt want to do? They want to play ball control. They got smoked by A&M. They beat UMass. They were in a war with Auburn, and that, again, Auburn's awful, and they got smoked by Alabama. So you don't just end up at 13th in total defense if you aren't playing well, but they've also failed every competent offense test that they've been handed between A&M and Alabama. Vandy was able to score on him, even though they shortened that game. So this is one of those that I think if you just watch Missouri, I don't think anyone is buying that that's like a top 15 unit in total defense or anything like that. So you flip it over, though. They do have a stud in Luther Burden. The big question is just going to be, if it's Pine, what can Missouri do to get Luther Burden the football? Because Pine went out there and he threw for, I think, 70 yards against Alabama and 3 interceptions, and it was a laugher with him going out there. He was not any good in the middle section of that game against Auburn while Cook was rushing over to the hospital next door and coming back. Luther Burden has dealt with injuries of his own. He's had an illness this year, and I think he's had an ankle situation that he played through, but he wasn't 100%. They were kind of putting him on a pitch count in some of those early games. So he's about half of his receptions from last year. He finished with 83, I think, last year for 1,200 yards. This year he's sitting at 40 with basically 450. Luther Burden, if Oklahoma lets him get behind him, or if they have any of those tackling issues that popped up against Texas or South Carolina, Luther Burden is going to run all day. But if it's Drew Pine, and as long as they can stay over the top of Luther Burden, who we've seen that this Missouri offense, even with one of the premier wide receivers in the country, kind of struggles to move with the backup.
Yeah, Burden is really good. If he's healthy, he's as good a wide receiver as there is in college football in the country, anywhere. And swallow this pill. He was committed to OU when Lincoln Riley was the coach. So that's an interesting one, and we'll certainly talk about this a little bit in the final segment of the show. But yeah, Burden, 40 catches for 450 yards right now, and his receiving mate, one Theo Weiss, 37 catches for 482 yards. Burden's got 4 touchdowns. Theo's got 1 touchdown. Theo is in his 6th college football season. Of course, OU fans will remember him as part of that. Spencer Rattler, Jaden Hazelwood, Trajan Bridges, Theo Weiss, a bunch of 5-star wide receivers and quarterbacks coming in 2019. Didn't work out for him. Brent Venables talked about it yesterday. Yesterday. He just wanted another opportunity, and he's getting it. He's making the most out of it. He's a captain now at Mizzou, and he's one of the top players on the offense. So it'll be fun to see him play again. And it'll certainly be fun to see Luther Burden play against this Oklahoma defense. That's something that OU's got to really, really be dialed in on defensively, is those 2 guys and a couple of others. There's a couple of other wide receivers who make plays. in this passing game. But you're right. If it's Drew Pine, they're going to do some things up front. I think Oklahoma would that would allow them to confuse him and make him hesitate and make him throw the football into dangerous situations.
Yeah, the other thing with Drew Pine that is not the case with Brady Cook is Drew Pine's pretty immobile in the pocket. He doesn't do much in like Jackson Dart's not going to pick up 100 yards on the ground, but everyone saw, right, what he's able to do, kind of slip around. That's not what Pine is. My biggest concern for Oklahoma, if it's Pine, wouldn't be like Luther Burden he's not like the Brew McCoy, like that Tennessee wide receiver group that was just so much bigger and more physical. Burden is strong as all get out, but he's 5'11", 205. My concern would be more of the situation like when Ryan Wingo won immediately inside leverage on the slant and then was able to make a couple guys miss and bust Texas out of their own end of the Cotton Bowl because he was able to make some guys miss. Now, I also don't think Makari Vickers is going to be out on the field in this game. We kind of seen that go to the wayside a little bit, but it'll be on Eli Bowen, who's been a really sure tackler. It'll be on the shoulders of whether it's Jacoby Johnson, who started alongside Eli Bowen, or Kenai Walker cannot give up the inside leverage like he has done multiple times this year. Des Malone got to stay with the guy. I don't think Des Malone can just straight turn and run with Luther Burden. So I asked Brent Venables about, hey, when you've got a guy that is dangerous like Luther Burden, but Missouri will also use him out of the backfield on reverses, all that stuff. What does that do to kind of stress some of those younger members of a secondary? And Brent Venables was like, yeah, you got to be aware of where he is, but you also have to play with good fundamentals. So that'll be the big question because if it is the backup, Oklahoma can handle Theo Weiss. Theo Weiss can't run away from anybody. He's a big physical guy. He's only looked fast once in his career, and it was against Texas Tech. That's it. End of list. So Theo may moss some people, but he's not going to have like an 80-yard chunk play that totally sends Frofield to a frenzy. That's the kind of thing that Luther Burden can bring for this Missouri offense.
Theo had a big play against Baylor his freshman year in that comeback. Remember that? 20 was it? That was the 28-3 game. Yeah.
Was that like 7 injuries ago?
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. 6 years of college football that dude's been playing. Yeah, fun stuff for sure. Shoot, what was I going to say about the wide receivers?
Missouri used a bunch of tight ends too. They've got
they do. They exploit the tight ends, and that's been a matchup problem for Oklahoma. What I was going to say was we're sitting here 9 games into the season now, going on game number 10, and we have cracked the OU offense reasonably so. They deserved it over and over and over in the shins, right? Cracked them in the shins. Because they couldn't get out of their own way. They couldn't protect. They couldn't run. They couldn't throw. They couldn't stay on the field. They couldn't generate first downs. But the defense, the OU defense, the OU offense fired their offensive coordinator and elevated a guy, changed quarterbacks twice, and right, it's a fire drill of the highest order. But the OU defense is sitting over here, coasting along, playing great. What do they do on the OU defense? They have subbed both starting quarterbacks. They now have 2 true freshmen. I'm sorry, Jacoby's not a true freshman, redshirt freshman.
A sophomore, basically, and a true freshman.
That's right, because he played in a bunch of special teams games last year. That's right. So he's a sophomore, but he made his first career start last week, and then they got a true freshman on the other side who made his first career start just a couple weeks earlier. They got these young green corners playing in the SEC against Missouri, Alabama, and LSU. Wow. We're, like I said, we've been killing the OU offense, and the OU defense is just sitting here and kind of idling almost, just kind of keeping it together, running guys in, running guys out, getting guys healthy at midseason like Dasan McCulloch. Some things change and some things never do, I guess.
Yeah, so some other stuff to watch. Ethan Downs, we talked about him a little bit, I think. Maybe we didn't. It all runs together. He missed the Maine game because of back spasms. That's a guy that Oklahoma will have to hope that he's back in, ready to rock and roll by Saturday, obviously, as far as just set the edge, get Missouri into 2nd and 8, 3rd and 8, and then that's when they can really bring the hammer and send R. Mason Thomas after Cook or Pine. how many times have we talked about this year? When you're in 3rd and 5, Oklahoma just can't get a consistent pass rush. When they're in 3rd and 10 in obvious passing situations, they kind of can. And so that's where your Deshaun McCulloughs can get out there to rush the passer. That's where they get pretty creative with the PJ, R. Mason Thomas, Trace Ford, Grayson Halton. That's where maybe a David Stone, who Britt Venables talked about a lot on his coach's show on Monday, give him a little bit of sugar, a little bit of confidence, and he rolls out, gets his first sack, all that stuff. All of that becomes an option if you can keep Missouri's running game on tap. And a lot of that will have to do with if Ethan Downs can go, because he's been their best guy defending the run on the edge, at least. I think that when Brent Venables talks a little bit about they didn't have enough edge, the edge of their defense kind of got rolled up a little bit on that first drive against Maine. I thought that was Caden Woolard that didn't necessarily hold up as well in the run game as Ethan Downs does, which is kind of one of his strengths.
Ethan Downs laid on the grass a couple of times at Ole Miss, right? Slow to get up, but he's out there making plays, chasing guys down, chasing the quarterback. But then they give him the week off because of back spasms, and then a week later, it's very likely that he's going to be back in the lineup. Let me just say this. Back spasms when you're 21 years old are completely different animals than back spasms when you're 50, man. Because I can't imagine having a back spasm and like taking, 4 days off and taking the weekend off and not doing anything and then coming back and playing a college football game. Not possible for me. I would be in bed for the first week and I would be walking around gingerly for the next 2 weeks.
You also have way less access to Toradol than these guys have. So that also maybe plays in, but no.
That's the good stuff.
Ethan is like a warrior. You know what I mean? And I think that was absolutely the, hey man, it's Maine. I know that Brent said, oh, they flared up again on Friday. I was like, okay, if they hadn't flared up on Friday, why would you play him against Maine? It was fine. It was okay. So it'll be a very similar conversation, a much more interesting conversation with, as Scout the Dog almost tries to take down my lights over here. Shout out to anyone watched on the YouTube. You're good, sweetheart. You're good.
Good girl.
Mike Tarquin at right tackle. I'll be interested to see what that looks like. He had the big boot on. I've been told that was more precautionary than anything else and that it was Maine. I don't know if you've heard anything different, but we will see. I would expect that you're back to Logan Howland, Heath Ozida, Troy Everett, Fedechi Wiwu, and Mike Tarquin as your starting offensive line against Missouri. And part of that, too, is just because Brent Venables confirmed they're just going to redshirt Eddie Pierre-Louis. He's played in 2 games out of the 4. There are 3 left. If they make it to a bowl game, Oklahoma, which I think they're going to need to win 6 games. I was doing some napkin math on their APR, and the too long didn't read is just win 6 games. But Eddie Pierre-Louis can play in 2 more games, but Brent said they're going to redshirt. Same with Xavier Robinson. The freshman running back. He's got 1 more game left. He's played in 3 games. But I would imagine for the most part, it was good to see those young guys. But the group that they've been kind of rolling with, that group that finished the Ole Miss game is what I expect will be the group that rolls out in Columbia on Saturday.
Were you a little surprised that he said straight up, we're going to redshirt those guys? We're going to get them.
Was a little bit.
We're going to cut them off at 4 games.
Yeah, was a little bit, but come to think of it, what's OU plan for right now? It's kind of what we talked about last week, that they're just playing for bowl eligibility, which will be huge for those guys to get those practices, stuff like that. But It would seem kind of silly to play him in, because like the maximum now would be to play Eddie Pierre-Louis in 5 games. And if you're playing him in 5 games to go 6-6, you might as well just play him in 4 games to go 6-6 and keep him around.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's a great strategy. Personally, as a fan of college football, as someone who enjoys being on the field in the last 4 minutes of the game and watching the 230-pound freshman running back run over dudes 4 plays in a row, I want to see that. I want to see collisions. I want to see the running back stiff arm and knock guys over and then plow them into the end zone. I don't care what team it is. I don't care what they got on their helmets or what color they're wearing. I love that kind of football. So I hope we get to see him again a couple times.
He was fun to watch, especially that play out of the backfield where he just brushes off the Maine defender as he's tiptoeing, and the Maine defender didn't even annoy him. Like Xavier Robinson I don't think he looked out. I think he was looking out the side. I was like, oh, I just shoved a guy. Anyway, did I stay in bounds? Okay, cool. 40 yards down.
It's like field. You're walking in your driveway to get in your car, and a fly flies over, and you're just like, as you get in your car, it's like, what? The fly is over here hurting, but you're getting in your car and driving away.
Make it stop. Make it stop. So it should be fun. Hey, let's continue our deep dive on the Tigers here, who take a quick timeout. We'll be joined by Joey Van Zummeren, who does a great job covering Missouri for Missouri Tigers on SI. We'll get he's boots on the ground in Columbia, right? So the official Cook update, the official Noel update, and everything. Missouri it's been kind of a weird year for the Tigers. 6-2. And the conversation around them, you'd think that they're the 5-4 team walking in, but they're still 6-2. So take a quick time out. We'll deep dive on Missouri, and then we'll circle back, take a step back, 10,000-foot view. What would this game mean for Oklahoma? Also, Hoops is off and running, all that fun stuff. Stick with us here on the Sooners on SI Podcast. All right, welcome back in. Let's take a road trip. It's the trip Hoover and I are taking this weekend, but you come along with us. We're going to head up to Columbia, over to Columbia, up and over, whatever. It doesn't matter. Joining us from Missouri Tigers on SI, it's our good friend Joey Van Zumer. Joey, what's up, man? How are you? How was the bye week for you guys?
I'm doing good. It was great to take a bye week. I'm sure for the team as well after getting crushed in Alabama. But yeah, good to have two bye weeks in the SEC this year, two off weeks, and looking forward to the matchup this week for sure.
The old double bye. It comes around once in a while here. Super helpful. Let's just start here. Sunday, this opens as a 4-point advantage for Missouri. By Tuesday night, the Sooners have flipped that all the way around. You don't see a 7-point swing as Oklahoma by Tuesday night was a field goal favorite, unless there's a big injury, specifically at quarterback. What are you hearing? What's your expectation for Brady Cook? Is this is a different injury than the concern going into the Alabama game, right?
Right, exactly. So early on in that Alabama game, he hit his hand on the helmet of an Alabama defender on a third down. And so the concern going into the Alabama game was the ankle injury that he had against Auburn. Hard to tell the severity of that ankle injury. The SEC availability reports help us with the day-by-day updates, but not really anything like the NFL where we get direct, concrete updates on the severity and all of that good stuff. So not sure on that ankle injury, but he wasn't able to practice all week leading up to that Alabama game, and then he suffers that hand injury that ultimately keeps him out of the rest of the Alabama game. So again, on both those, I mean, I'd assume his hand isn't broken. That would keep him out for the rest of the season, presumably. But the fact that Eli Drinkwitz just last week said he absolutely expects Brady Cook to return at some point in the season would indicate it's not broken. And we'll get our first availability report tonight, but they've closed off practice before the Alabama game and for this game as well to the media. They usually have open practice session on Tuesday. The media can view, cutting that all off. So there's nothing getting out on Brady Cook. But yeah, I mean, we're really just kind of having to read the tea leaves as of now. The one thing we've got from Brady Cook before the bye week, he did an interview with a St. Louis TV channel and said the bye week would be really important. So there's that again. Just the fact that there's hope, I guess, from both Drinkwitz and then Cook himself would be a good sign if you're a Missouri fan.
Yeah, Joey Drink said yesterday that it will be Drew Pine if Cook can't go. But boy, you talked to Brent Venables. He said it a couple of times this week. That Auburn game where he leaves in the first quarter with the injury, gets treatment, gets evaluation at the hospital across the street, gets back. I don't know, ambulance. Do they put him in a golf cart? They bring him back into the stadium. He comes in late in the third quarter and leads them back from a double-digit deficit to win. Brent Venables said it a couple of times this week. He put his Superman cape on and came in and saved the day. He's that kind of quarterback. He's that kind of talent for this Missouri team, isn't he?
Exactly. I mean, that's the one thing that I don't think any Missouri fan has ever questioned about Brady Cook. There's certainly been question about his play, both in his first year as a starter in 2022, and even in that season where he was dealing with a injury to his throwing arm, and that didn't come out until the end of the season. So that colored a lot of people's perception. 2023, the first 3 weeks of the season, he gets booed before the Kansas State game. And then even in that game against Kansas State, he suffers an injury, comes back and leads them to a victory. And that really propelled him throughout the whole season. And then, yeah, that Auburn game was one of the craziest things I've seen in a football game from just a single player perspective. and especially just the way that the information came out to us was really interesting because we were getting updates piecemealed by ESPN, the broadcast, and then Pete Thamel on Twitter was also having some reports, and they were conflicting at times. But Pete Thamel and the broadcast pretty much ruled Brady Cook out at the start of the second half. We didn't see him come out there for warmups ahead of the second half, and like, all right, he's not going to come back just randomly in the third quarter. The last real report we got of even his whereabouts was the fact that right after he got injured, he was in the locker room being taped up and was going to come back soon in the first quarter. And then so once he wasn't back, even on the sideline, it's like, all right, he's got to be done for the day. But then, yeah, like you said, goes to the hospital right over to MU Healthcare across the street. He said to your question, he was on a truck with a trainer, and he could see like fans outside tailgating, watching the game on TV, and I'm sure they were very confused. But yeah, just a great game from him in that one, and probably ironically playing on a bum ankle for that last quarter against Auburn is probably the best he's looked all season long. And it's difficult because I mean he was playing on a bum ankle, and obviously they shot him up with painkillers, but the part of his game where he's just able to extend plays almost a Russell Wilson ability back when he was with the Seahawks of just being able to keep plays alive for longer than they probably should. And then also, I mean, just being able to, there was a lot of third downs last year where we just tuck it down and run for it himself. He did that 2 times against Auburn with the injured ankle. So it's been difficult to evaluate Brady's season so far, but that Auburn game was a great showing for him playing wise, and then also just his toughness.
Brady, tough as nails, but if he can't go, Hoover and I were just talking. I at least have two lasting memories of Drew Pine. First, the kind of super cut of his Notre Dame days 2 years ago, and then last year there were a lot of Oklahoma fans that watched him slice and dice a Lincoln Riley defense at Arizona State. It did not look like from afar things went very well in that middle portion of the Auburn game, or certainly against Alabama. What is Drew Pine in the Missouri offense if Cook's not able to go?
Yeah, so against Auburn, it was difficult to evaluate him, and just the offensive line was really struggling against Auburn. It just felt like he really didn't have a fair chance to get anything going. There was a few nice plays he made. They really just tried to get the play action game going, have him roll out a little bit, and then just dunk it off to his players. And there he was fine. And honestly, anytime he tried to throw it more than 10 yards, though, pretty wildly inaccurate. And then against Alabama, it kind of all came crashing down. And although the offensive line struggled against Alabama at some points, he just was seeing ghosts out there a few times. Obviously, he has 3 interceptions. His very first pass attempt is a unexplainable interception. So I think I think you can win football games with Drew Pine. Maybe not against Alabama, but Missouri has the players where they can win even without Brady Cook at quarterback. I think they have Luther Burden, obviously, can be your entire offense. Nate Noel at running back you can really run through him. I mean, that was the identity of the Missouri offense last year, even though they had that explosive plays. Cody Schrader ran the offense pretty much. So, and Nate Noel hasn't been a massive drop off in production when they've asked him to take over a game. They have, besides Burden, a really skilled wide receiver room, but the challenge is going to be even past Brady, their health on offense with all their skilled players, and even at left guard with familiar name to Oklahoma fans and Caden Green, who's dealing with injury that kept him out for most of the Alabama game. But last week against Alabama, or 2 weeks ago, they couldn't. Nate Noel was missing the game, so that takes away a big part of it. And then Luther Burden, you would think, and would be the big part of the offense when you have a backup quarterback in. You just get the ball to him, doesn't matter how far he is down the field, and then all of a sudden he can just one-on-ones against defensive backs and really make space for himself. But against Auburn, he didn't get a single touch until late in the second quarter. Against Alabama, I want to say he only had 3 receptions. There just hasn't been a real concerted effort to force feed him, which can sometimes be a negative. But when you're dealing with a backup quarterback without your starting running back, you would think that would be the go-to, but that just hasn't been the case. So that would be my guess for a winning formula if they do have Drew Pine in there. But we'll see what they roll out there if that's the case.
Yeah, Joey, do you expect Nate Noel to play?
It's hard to say. I mean, he missed the week 7 game against UMass with back tightness, and I think that was just because of the flight complications because they played a away game at UMass for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then this past one, it's a foot injury he's dealing with, and he suffered it against Auburn too. And like Brady, he returned in the second half, but after returning from this foot injury against Auburn, he only stayed in for a couple of drives. I'm assuming tried to work it out and realized it wasn't going to happen. And Eli Drinkwitz said after that game, we don't know if it's broken. And I believe he was doubtful all week last week leading up to the Alabama game. So again, without having the concrete stuff, it's difficult to tell. But if he can't go, they do still have a solid running back room. They just don't have the speed anywhere else. You know, Marcus Carroll is a Georgia State transfer who had 1,300 yards last year. But he's more of a power back, not really the guy that you can rely on. And then they have Jamal Roberts, who's a redshirt freshman. He's really good in pass pro, really good as a receiver, but again, not somebody you would put your whole offense on.
When you flip it over to the other side of the ball, Missouri, not a bad defense by any means, but
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma coming off of the Murders Row playing Texas, Ole Miss, and South Carolina all in a row might take somewhat of a half step back and a deep breath, which is kind of crazy because it's a pretty good Missouri defense still, as they've had a bunch of change, especially in the secondary.
Yeah, exactly. I think this Missouri defense has outperformed some fans' expectations. They've been inconsistent and they've certainly had their problems allowing deep passes. That's kind of been a struggle area for them. The secondary has been a little bit shaky at times. The one really solid corner they have, Drayden Norwood, again, is also dealing with the injury he suffered against Alabama. So we'll see again when the first availability report comes out Wednesday night what the status of Norwood is. But the pass rush has really gotten going over the past few weeks. They hit a low against Texas A&M early on in the season. The pass rush was pretty much non-existent, even though they had the talent to be productive. And now you're starting to kind of see it come together, and they certainly have depth on the front seven of this defense. At defensive end, you have Johnny Walker, who's been with Mizzou for I think it's his 5th year now, and has really become productive. Zion Young, I would say, is their best pass rusher. He's a Michigan State transfer who really started to get things going against Auburn. Just a really freaky athletic guy, but also just really powerful. Kind of has a nice mix of using the power rush and then sometimes just his speed to get around offensive tackles. So we'll see in this game again. They've been inconsistent, but they've also against Alabama. In those first few drives there, they forced 2 straight 3-and-outs for Alabama. They held them to 6 points until Drew Pine had to come in. Against Auburn, they let up 14 points in the third quarter, but also they really held that game down. And if the defense doesn't do that, then Brady Cook doesn't even have a point to return to that one. So we'll be interesting to see how they. I mean, they don't really have to right the ship on too many things, but they definitely have a few things they need to switch up. But they have good playmakers on that side of the ball for sure.
Yeah, I'll follow up real quick, Joey, on that. When you look at the Missouri defense, you see a total defense number 13 in the country. You see passing yards allowed number 10 in the country, scoring defense number 17 in the country. But you dig a little deeper and you see Murray State 51-0.
Yeah.
You see Buffalo 38-0. You see UMass 45-3. Is that a little bit of a mirage with some of those rankings, do you think, because of those games?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when they shut out Murray State in week 1 and then Buffalo in week 2, they were definitely championing whatever the last time they had 2 straight shutouts. And then against Boston College, they really started to show some cracks, and especially with deep plays. Thomas Castellanos scores a 67-yard passing touchdown. And I think for both the offense and the defense, really just getting out to a slow start has been a problem for both of them. And especially with this defense against Boston College, they open up and they allow 14 unanswered points, and a lot of them on bad mistakes. But yeah, I would definitely agree with you that their stats are a little bit beauty blended up because of those first 2 non-con games, and we'll see what happens this week.
This bad boy, 6:45 SEC Network, Saturday night. Oklahoma's first trip back to Columbia since 2010, a pretty famous night in Missouri football, at least. This is a really weird game. We've been talking with a lot of different guys in our network about Oklahoma. It's their first trip to Auburn. They've only played 2 or 3 times. It was the first ever meeting with South Carolina. This is the 97th meeting with OU in Missouri. You've got Theo Weiss, Caden Green, who were former OU players, Luther Burden, a commit, Williams Nwaneri, everything that went on with that, JJ Hester's in Norman. How weird is this? Like, is the excitement that Oklahoma's come back? What's the vibe in Columbia with the old Big 8 foes getting back at it?
I hope Williams Nwaneri like pulls out maybe not Oklahoma gloves, but some sort of homage to that whole fiasco there. But yeah, it is an interesting vibe because none of these players obviously were here when they played Oklahoma or even when Mizzou first departed to the SEC to have any memory or kind of even have that vibe around. And I do think, though, it definitely has picked up on social media with some of the situations you mentioned. But these players, we talked to them yesterday. We talked to Theo Weiss, and he's been interesting with this whole situation. I don't think he's looking for revenge by any means, but there was a situation where he had commented on a Oklahoma fan's like Instagram post over the summer, and he said something like, "I can't wait to play all," something like that. And so when I asked him at media day at the start of the season how much he was looking forward to the Oklahoma game, and he said, "Oh, I don't really care." I questioned it a little bit, but he said this week that he's excited and he left it at that. And yeah, I think mostly though it's social media, but as far as the actual Mizzou fans here, there's definitely some excitement to have this rivalry rekindled, and maybe not the big showdown that people thought it would be at the start of the season for a spot in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, still a lot of history between these teams. I think a lot of people are going to be thinking of that 2010 matchup the last time Oklahoma came to Faroe and Mizzou ends up upsetting them. And yeah, the players yesterday, though, I asked Christian Williams, the defense tackle, about it, and he said, "Shoot, you probably know more than me about it." So they're aware of it. That's what Eli Drinkwitz said. They're aware of it. They go over each time before they play a team the history between them, just like the records. But I don't think, with the way that Eli Drinkwitz has built this program, I don't think they're really a team that wants to care about rivalries. And there's some of it that feels like coach speak, but his message all this year has been not playing for any external factors, just playing, just us mentality. And even with the UMass game, the spin he put on that non-con game was, we're not playing for any factors of the stadium like you would in an SEC game to have that ramp up. They're just going out there playing football. So, I mean, especially if there was some more recent history, maybe they would be a little bit more bitter about it. I mean, shoot, Eli Drinkwitz certainly held that grudge against Josh Heupel last year when they played Tennessee. So, other than that, though, I think this is mostly fan base fodder. And maybe, though, now that they're back, both of them are on the SEC, maybe it will pick up a little bit more.
I've been saying all offseason, and I'm old, so I've got some experience in Columbia covering the Sooners. But I've been saying all offseason, the Missouri fans, who are renowned for their hostility toward the opposing team, the visiting team, they've been lying in wait. Missouri fans have, waiting to tell OU, this is the SEC. This is how we play football in the SEC. We've only been here for 12 years, but still, this is how we play. So it should be fun. My question is, you mentioned Eli. What's the Drinkwitz experience been like covering him? Just in terms of his. I watched his press conference yesterday. It's first time I've seen him since the SEC media days. He's got an interesting vibe as a head coach.
Yes, so my first year covering Mizzou football was last year, so I wasn't there to see him throughout the downs before the high, but I was paying attention at SEC Media Days, not before this past season, but before the 2023 season, and there he made a concerted effort to not make any viral moments. Now, he's improved at that for sure. He still is a goofy guy from Arkansas that sometimes says things like he would set his starting quarterback up with his 12-year-old daughter. Sometimes he just lets stuff like that. So that's just his sense of humor, and sometimes he doesn't think that stuff through. But I do think, to your point, he is almost like, and I don't mean to call him calculated or anything like that, but he is very conscious of the marketing and the PR he does of a team, of a program that needs to earn more respect, and he realizes that. There was a ESPN profile done on him before the Alabama game that I think was really illuminating, and he talked about how in the years before he himself needed to be not the star of the program, but he needed to be the face of the program, and he wanted to be that. He needed to be the one that was lifting Missouri up in those ranks. And then now the focus has shifted to, now that they are starting to have much higher ranked recruiting classes, are starting to have actual success like last year, that he wants attention like they do at any other school, really, to be on the stars. He wants Luther Burden, Brady Cook to be some of the most popular names in college football. And that ESPN profile also illuminated just how this feels pretty mean, but, or, well, I'll choose a different word and say he's very protective of his team. There are some questions, I think what I've learned as a journalist, even in my young career, is just knowing with different coaches, different players, the right way to ask a question to them, the right way to get to them. And sometimes you might have to change your phrasing. And with Eli, you really have to make sure, I mean, this goes for any coach, but really just towing that line of making it no room for interpretation that you're insulting his team. And because otherwise he's not going to give you the answer you want. There's been sometimes I've asked him this year of just offensive production or something that's not going well, and he'll, just his big thing this year is not caring about the outside noise, not caring about what people have to say. So again, he's very aware of the message he wants to send, and sometimes though he does have his few gaffes.
Yeah, asking questions at a post-game setting or a press conference, a skill that needs to be developed and nurtured by the press today, for sure.
Not even the post-game
Absolutely.
setting. We at NC Media Day, it took us 2 bites at the apple to get Eli Drinkwitz to talk about Caden Green. So I had to rephrase the second time and be like, what do you remember from your high school relationship building?
Yep.
All that stuff. That when
not that you tampered or anything, but back when you were recruiting him as a high school guy, that whole thing. Have to set it up.
Have to set it up, which right. He still gave the smile and like, okay, whatever. This is another Oklahoma guy asked about Caden Green. But no, it should be fun. Excited. 6:45, like we said, SEC Network. Joey, where can everyone find all of your stuff if they're looking to take a deeper dive on everything coming out of Columbia in the lead up to this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Twitter at JoeyVZ_, and then at Mizzou on SI, we have day-to-day coverage of everything going on with football, and then basketball season picking up as well. So with it being a prestigious state school, it's me and a handful of other students here, just really passionate about bringing this coverage.
It's great stuff. It's been great. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day, and we'll see you up there this weekend.
Of course. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. Thanks, Joey. Big
shout out to Joey. Appreciate him hopping on, and appreciate the real look in behind Missouri. How great are these on SI crossovers that we've been doing? I know they've been really good, just especially with having the ability to take the step back and be like, hey, we can look at it from the over here 1,000 miles away, whatever that feels like. But they're on top of it. They're on the ground. So we appreciate that. We appreciate Joey. I don't know who we're going to book next week. We've already had Brady air all of his grievances for the bye week, the great Brady Trantham. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to just talk like basketball or something, which is a scary thing for me because we should talk Thunder basketball. We should bring people some joy, maybe. Well, when we were planning the week when they played Maine, I reached out to Maine's most famous resident, Stephen King, and he kind of stiffed me. I can follow up with him if you want. We can talk about the OU bye week. He's probably a little too political for the current environment since yesterday was election day. So maybe we could move on to someone else. Maybe I'll reach out to Herb Street, see if he wants to come on the Sooners on SI podcast. We can't reach out to Herbie because he's dealing with Ben, man. I know, what a sad situation, that poor dog. So, well, we'll figure something out as we roll forward. But we have a game this weekend. Let's dive back in, Hoove. Um, if Oklahoma can pick this one off, they win 6 games. Every coach will tell you the 3 weeks of bowl practice, yada yada yada. That's great, and it's correct. I don't yada yada it just because it's incorrect. It is correct. But this is Oklahoma, and you don't get to beat your chest about development for young guys when you go if you go 6-6 or even 7-5. But what would a win this weekend mean to you? Who, for me, it would be coming off a little bit of the really harsh hammering Brent Venables after South Carolina, after Ole Miss. If they get some guys back healthy and they're able to win against a Missouri team that's banged up, you take advantage of that, then it's showing that while this team has far underachieved what is acceptable to Oklahoma, even though it took a coordinator change, there has been some minimal improvement on offense, but that improvement has allowed Oklahoma to at least play football games again this year, as opposed to that bad stretch. I think it would be pretty important in showing, can Brent Venables get a roster to improve throughout the year? Because I'm not sure that happened last year, even when they won 10 games, that they were better in week 12 than they were.
Yeah.
I mean, you just look at what happened after the Texas game.
That's a great point, Ryan. That's a really great point. The fact that Brent Venables' first 2 teams did not improve from September to November. They just didn't. In some areas they got worse. In some areas they regressed. And in some areas they stayed the same. A couple of improvements here and there, but it was always 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. This team, from where they started out, offense especially, this team has it's tough. It's tough to quantify that because of all the injuries. The offensive line, there's been injuries on the offensive line, certainly a lot, and it has affected the lineup and who's playing and the talent that's on the field, but not to the extent the wide receivers are, where you literally don't have anyone to throw to, But to come through that, and if you're able to improve, like we've talked about, 2005, 2009, the back half of the season, and get to that bowl game. Here's the thing about getting to a bowl game, whether you're Oklahoma or you're UAB or Boise State, getting to a bowl game is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because your team becomes better because you are able to practice throughout the month of December. Basically, you get an additional month of practice. So when spring practice starts, you're a month ahead of where you would be if your team didn't get to a bowl game. So every year you go to a bowl game, you get those extra practices, you get that much better, and the following year you're ready to go to another bowl game. And you get those practices again, and it just keeps kind of feeding itself. So it's huge for Oklahoma. This would be to go 5-7 and not make a bowl game for this team would be a massive setback, not just for Brent Venables, but for the program, because that would interrupt. It would force a bit of a reset, right? You go into the winter, you go into spring football on an absolute downer. What'd you guys do last December? Oh, well, I kind of went home for a couple of weeks and hung out with my parents, and I worked out, and we didn't really do much because we didn't make a bowl game. You don't want to be able to say that as a college football player. You want to be able to say, we practiced the entire month of December. We got better. So when spring football practice started, we were ready to go.
Yeah, well, and you look at it too, whether, and I'm not saying this is going to happen either way, but let's just say Oklahoma wins this week or makes a bowl game, whatever. If they're 6-6 or 7-5, like the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa is a popular projection. Danny Stutzman, who's got NFL future, whether he opts out of that bowl game or whether he stays to finish out his Oklahoma career, you know what happens during the bowl practice? Stutzman, you're going to take the mental reps because you don't need the 2.5, 3 extra weeks of practice.
Right.
But we want you to stand there and make sure that Lewis Carter is doing everything that he needs to do and get more and more reps there. Hey, Billy Bowman, you're going to go back to what you did a little bit during the spring where you weren't doing a bunch of the physical reps, but you're there to help Jaden Hardy and Michael Boganowski and Peyton Bowen and Robert Spridge. It helps kind of spin that forward with the good season that Eli Bowen has had as a true freshman at corner. You're telling me you don't want Jay Valai to have 2.5, 3 more weeks to work with him and continue to bring him along. Obviously, the offensive line goes without saying, some of those young wide receivers, all that stuff. Plus, I do really think and maybe this is just reading too far into things, but you tell me, we talking to the players on Tuesday night, I got the sense of, we've asked, what can you actually take from a victory over Maine, other than like confidence stuff that's not really tangible that you can roll forward, and that remains to be seen. But just the energy of the guys we talked to, they just seem so much more relaxed, take a deep breath, smiling again, just because of the fact that they're not feeling themselves because they beat the Maine Black Bears. No one in that locker room's like, look what we just did. But you know what they are? We're not on a 3-game losing streak. The world around us isn't crumbling. It's 1 week that you're not getting yelled at. You know what I mean? But I think that it was like, you could just tell it allowed this team to maybe take a deep breath and go, let's try to have some fun again, play free, kind of embody what Jackson Arnold's talked about since he stepped back into the lineup of play free, play loose, have fun, and almost take the mentality of, instead of the pressure of Oklahoma, you're now a team that, even though you are Oklahoma and it's a disappointment, you're still playing with nothing to lose at this point. I think that might be the lasting legacy of this Maine week the rest of the year.
Yeah, talked to some of the players last night. Kobe McKenzie, for instance, Deshaun McCulloch, Jackson Arnold, Jaden Jackson. The guys that I interviewed, I asked them all a version of the question. Was there a noticeable pep in your step, so to speak, quote unquote, air quotes, this week at practice? Did you notice a little more energy? Did you notice a little more focus? Were guys having a little bit more fun because you're coming off a win specifically, as opposed to a 3-game losing streak? At the end of a 3-game losing streak, you're starting to look at each other and you're starting to doubt what everybody's been talking about. And you come off a win, it's like, hey, we're back, and we're kind of feeling, I know, Maine, I know. I'm not an idiot. Maine is Maine. But you're coming off a 40-point win over at home at the end of a 3-game losing streak. I think all of them, especially Jackson Arnold, said, there was more energy at practice, a little more focus, a little more fun. Everybody was having a little more good time. Pep in the step, sure, absolutely. So I think that's huge. And as for the SEC's bowl tie-ins, Gasparilla Bowl, if it is down there on the pecking order, if OU is 6-6 and goes to Tampa, Danny Stutzman better not opt out of that one. He's from Tampa. He's from the Tampa area. Windermere's like 30 minutes inland from Tampa, Florida. So he needs to get there and play in that one.
I love Danny. I think he's very dedicated to this program. He doesn't need to play in any of these bowls. Danny Stutzman needs to play 3 more games, and he needs to go pursue his NFL aspirations, because appreciate what he's done, all that stuff.
He wants to play a bowl game in his hometown. Come on.
Even if he does, he needs to get the advice of, I understand the want to. It would be incredibly stupid to do so, but that's neither here nor there. Be sure you're swinging back through OklahomaSooners.com. As always, we've got everything all the players said this week, all those interview videos, the Brent Venables press conference, as well as all the stories. Hoover's big column about what's different about Missouri now than the last time they matched up. Little memory lane, less history lesson, more memory lane of how fun these games have been, even if Oklahoma typically wins them. What Oklahoma's defensive backs had to say about Luther Bird in that matchup. That went up on Wednesday, and then I'll be writing about J.J. Hester's return back to Missouri, as well as some of the roster intermingling, as you've got Caden Green and Theo Weiss in the Missouri locker room. Luther Bird's a former Oklahoma commit. Williams Winery was a big old recruiting battle. You've got J.J. Hester and Norman, all that stuff. Joe John spent some time briefly at Missouri. It's a weird for 2 teams that haven't played since 2011. It feels like this is a roster of like, these are 2 teams that are recruiting battle, all that stuff in the same conference. Yeah. It's weird. So
it's fun. This is a fun game, especially the spicy that I asked Brent Venables. I asked him the question about does Missouri look anything like they did as an SEC team than what you used to compete against when they were in the Big 12? And I liked his answer. He said being in the SEC forces you to see things through a different lens, whether it's recruiting or roster engagement or coaches or facilities or whatever. He's 100% right. Missouri has, become an SEC team. And they're putting money into their stadium and their facilities and stuff, and they're boosting their NIL. And the part that I asked him about is this, it's fun for a lot of people to watch this thing unfold because it can get a little spicy. OU Missouri gets a little spicy. And what I mean by that is there was a lot of finger pointing when Caden Green left Oklahoma in the middle of a practice and packed up his stuff and left campus because he had just agreed to a new extended, whatever the terminology is, a renewed NIL contract. And he said, yeah, that works for me. That works. And then the next thing, somebody sees him, pushing a shopping cart full of his stuff down the sidewalk. Like, what are you doing? Shouldn't you be at practice? No, I'm leaving, and I'm going to Missouri. So there were hundreds, if not thousands, of fingers in Norman pointing, calling it tampering on the part of Eli Drinkwitz and Missouri's NIL coalition or whatever. So yeah, crazy, crazy stuff. At the time, I remember there was a lot of sore feelings and there was a lot of spiciness. Brent Venables said, "It's not spicy to me." It was last year, and there was some similar feelings when Williams Nwaneri, was basically almost headed to Norman. If you talk to the people who follow, whose lifeblood is recruiting, and not just follow recruiting, but make a living at it, he was coming to Oklahoma. And then, Missouri state legislature enacts that law that says if you're in the state of Missouri and you sign with a Missouri school, we're going to give you NIL money in high school. And so he got a bunch of apparently NIL money in high school and was headed to Norman. So, bro, I get where you're coming from. It's not spicy to me. That's a solid quote. But the reality is OU wants to beat the what out of Missouri for those two reasons right there.
Brent Venables needs to take over my Twitter account for a day and go read the replies when I asked Eli Drinkwitz about Caden Green at SEC Media Day. The replies to my story, it was spicy. It was spicy.
Spicy.
It's a night game. It's a blackout.
The Antlers are going to be out there in force. They're all going to be drinking all day. It's going to be an ugly, ugly atmosphere. I thought Ole Miss were those little tie wearing dudes, the little frat boys in the end zone, and the disgusting things they were saying to the players, which the players were laughing at. They're not like distracted by it or hurt by it or anything, but it was just like, dude, do you kiss your mom with that mouth? The Antlers are worse. The Antlers are way worse than anything Ole Miss can throw out there.
Well, it's fun. So we have been on the receiving end of a ton of hospitality. We also, on a game day, are not wearing the opposing team's colors. Like we're in basically what we're wearing right now. We've got, stuff that identifies us as media. We're an enemy to no one, right?
Yeah.
But talking to my buddies, talking to the great Brady Trantham, who went to Auburn, he's like, yeah, the Auburn people were awesome. They were great. Talking to my buddies that went to Ole Miss outside of the stadium, like the student section, I don't think anybody's hand-wringing about that. But at the Grove, the people were great.
Awesome.
I have been to Columbia. They are an awful fan base. They are like drunk, yelly. They will yell at toddlers. As I have seen my 4-year-old sister gotten lit up by a bunch of Missouri. Like they're like they're trashy people. They are. It's a trashy fan base, and there will
you saw Ozark on Netflix, right?
Yeah. I do not expect there to be this big hospitable hug and welcome, we're back, we're on the same league again. It's gonna be like screw you and screw where you came from, and it should be fun. I'm excited. I'm excited for some hostility.
Oh, it's going to be exciting. Let me just say, my first job out of college. Okay, when the day I graduated, I packed up a U-Haul and I drove it to Central Missouri. I lived in Missouri for 6 months. Really enjoyed getting back to Okmulgee, Oklahoma when I returned. That was where I came back to, was Okmulgee, and it was beautiful. It was like a Shangri-La compared to where I was living. I was living in Waynesville, Rolla, St. Robert area. So there's a huge Fort Leonard Wood military base there. It's a little sketchy. So, but that was my first job out of college. I worked at a newspaper in Ada during college, full time. But yeah, that was my first job, and it was an eye opener, man. Like different state laws. They have different state laws in Missouri than they have in Oklahoma, and I'm like, but we don't do. Yeah, but this is Missouri. Okay. I'm 21 years old and I didn't know anything.
Yeah, I watch a lot of European soccer, and it's funny because the away section of a soccer stadium is the only place that away fans are allowed to be. There's security that rings the away section.
Smart.
If you're a Like if you're an Oklahoma fan in London, if you go to like a Premier League game, you just don't go on SeatGeek and buy a road ticket. Like that doesn't exist. If you're wearing other colors, they will escort you out if you're not in the away end. That's how it is. That is not how college football is, not how the NFL is. The last time that we were all in Columbia, there was a police presence roped around the Oklahoma section for, it wasn't like the Oklahoma fans were like, they were just rolled up, whatever, in 2010. It's because of the Missouri people. Like they had to have the police to like keep everybody. It's the only time I can ever remember seeing that. It was a scene straight out of European soccer in Columbia. I don't know. I didn't blow this by Hoover, so sorry if me calling the Missouri fans trashy does not live up to our journalistic standards here. But that's boots on the ground. That is my firsthand experience. It's the opinion of Ryan, me, I. It should be fun, and it's the best way. By the way, I hope you know that I love hostile, crazy college football environments, and that's what you're going to get. It's not going to be a welcome Oklahoma. It's going to be like, we haven't FU'd in 15 years and we're ready. So it should be hostile, fun, and spicy.
These next 2 road games, you get all the hostile you want. LSU and Missouri, you're going to get all the hostile you want. It reminds me of that what you're saying with the roped off area. Reminds me of that scene in Batman or Dark Knight where he's in the Tibetan prison and they drag him off and put him in solitary, and he goes, I don't need protection. No, they're protection from you.
Exactly. That is the Columbia experience. So should be fun. I'm excited. 6:45 sharp, SEC Network. And listen, I don't like listening to the commentators either. When I listen to stuff, I watch a lot of games on mute, which is why you just go to Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, pull up the live blog. We've covered the team all year. We know what's happening with this group, all of our thoughts, all of our observations, and all of our stories from if we run into a great tailgate. We'll let you know that too in the live blog, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Hoove, real quick before we toss out of here, we are in the great crossover season. OU hoops got going. Monday night, let's tackle this chronologically. The women went first, then followed by the Oklahoma men. Jenny Baranchek's number 10 ranked Sooners dispatched of Southern 76-44. I was on hand for that bad boy. Here's the 2 or 3 thoughts immediately. Reagan Beers, I think everyone's very excited for what the Oregon State transfer is going to bring in. She herself admitted was a little nervy on the first couple of possessions, but she brought it defensively immediately, and everything that you think of what she's going to bring and all that stuff proved positive through one game against a Southern team. Oklahoma didn't even play very well. They had a bunch of turnovers. They didn't shoot the 3 ball very well, and they still just absolutely hammered Southern, a team that came into the Lloyd Noble Center and won a year ago. A lot of that started with what Reagan Beers is doing defensively, and then what she's going to open up for Skylar Van, Peyton Verhulst, who didn't shoot the ball very well, that she's going to be fine, and Sahara Williams. Sahara Williams is kind of the talk of media day as far as like, yes, Reagan Beers is going to be awesome, but the work that Sahara did to roll her game forward, you saw this is going to be just a team that's an absolute pest for everybody in SEC play because they're deep, they're athletic, and they've got a little extra muscle down low with Reagan Beers.
I can't wait to see how they match up with the rest of the SEC. First year in the SEC, they're probably looking around going, ooh, that team's good. Ooh, that player's good. It's a different animal, as Patty Gasso said. It's a different animal, so we'll see how things match up.
Especially with some of those road trips at South Carolina, at LSU. Not a ton of favorites. Texas coming to the LNC, but not much there. That rolled into the men. Porter Moser's crew got rolling 93-60. Winners over Lindenwood. Shot 34 threes, which bested their high of last year. It took them just one game to do that. Jeremiah Fears did not start, but the electric freshman came in off the bench. He led Oklahoma in minutes, 26 minutes. He was unbelievable. You can tell that there's some freshman stuff. Not only is he a guy that reclassified Hoove, because he reclassified, he got there later than a freshman normally would have. So he's a hair behind on both fronts. But I think that we finally are going to see a freshman that Porter Moser is just going to have to let play through some of the freshman mistakes, some of the freshman stuff, because what he brought offensively, his first possession, he's lobbing to Jalen Moore. He's got the wow. He's got the sizzle with not just the handles, but the way he can create his own shot. And I think that's going to pair really well with, I mean, frankly, a lot of the guys that they brought in from the portal were role players elsewhere, role players at smaller schools to be 3-and-D guys. That's great if you have someone like a Duke Miles or a Jeremiah Fears that can be the central figure that can run the offense, then that can let those guys be the role player. Sam Godwin was the animal on the boards again, and Jalen Moore flashed off some of that expanded range. He went through the draft process. That's kind of what they told him. Need to be able to shoot from deep. He looked comfortable, calm, collected, pulling from deep. I think he ended up with 14. It was everything I think you wanted for Oklahoma out of their opener. They didn't shoot the ball very well initially. The men and the women didn't. I think that's more first game jitters than everything else. But then I think the men made like 11 of their last 23 or 12 of their last 23 from deep. Once they got going, they just shot the lights out. No one's going to get a cookie for beating Lindenwood, but what you're supposed to do, and I understand, everyone's going to have PTSD from what they did a year ago, which was beat up on a lot of bad basketball teams and lose in Big 12 play, but all they can do on night one is play Lindenwood, and they hammered Lindenwood on night one.
Good summary, Ryan. Just remember, gambling is illegal at Lindenwood.
Yeah, always. Oh, well, let's throw it on the tape, but we don't want to dive in too much there.
Shout out to my Caddyshack viewers.
Yes. That is the hoop scene. The women are back in action Friday against Virginia.
Should be good.
You and I will be on the road. We'll be in Kansas City on Friday, so we won't be there on hand. There will still be coverage at the site, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. The men, the next time they're in action is Monday against Northwestern State out of Louisiana. The Demons, I believe. So that should be just another one there as we roll through. Really, for both these teams, they get going during feast week as they kind of leave Oklahoma for some of those multi-team invite stuff like that. But that is the road ahead for that. Just an FYI, softball newcomer media day did not happen on Monday. I know I was very excited about that, but the severe weather, all that stuff. So that will still happen. We just haven't had a date for that yet. So trust me, we will let you know when it happens. Learn all about the new freshmen, all about the new transfers, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, as well as our continued hoops coverage. Everything from Columbia, boots on the ground, bye week, all that stuff. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, as well as the YouTube page, John Hoover Media. John, I know we're in crossovers. As I left anything else out, I think we've got everything.
I think we got everything.
Okay, well, if I missed anything, here's the easy way to make sure you got it all. Just follow us on Twitter at Sooners on SI. Everything that we do comes out there, obviously, as well as at Johnny Hoover. I'm at _Ryan Chapman. We got the whole squad. Make sure you're following Dakota at Dakota Gregory. Bryce is at McKinnis Bryce, and Randall is at Randall Sweet 5. The next time you will hear Hoove's lovely voice, and you'll have to tolerate my nasally one, will be Saturday night, late night pod from the press box in Columbia. Hopefully, maybe they'll have kicked us out, and if not, we'll be in Jefferson City in a hotel room doing the podcast. You tell me. The SEC and their press box policies, figure it out. Are we going to walk in year one and tell them how to do stuff? Absolutely. That's what I'll do.
Next year.
That is John Hoover. I'm Brian Chat. We'll talk to you guys Saturday night, next Thursday, all that fun stuff. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you.